We're going to hear from Colin Dean and Nick Taylor First speaker tonight is going to be Colin, and he's talking about code review as an architectural necessity. He's a software engineer for a major retailer, and he has built software for IBM, Target, I'm not going to say this correctly, Vivissimo, it's been a long day, and Arcadia.io, plus some open source software used by a lot of Mac using developers. He's served on boards of 4 nonprofits, founding 2, and advising other nonprofits on leadership and technical topics. He spends most of his time directing Code and Supply, Pittsburgh's largest community of software professionals, and its meetups, conferences, and otherwise loves cuddling with his dogs and partner and wears many hats. We love to see it, literally and figuratively with the hats. So I am going to turn it over to Colin.
All right. Looks like screen sharing is disabled.
I can do that. I'm so sorry.
No worries. Yeah, I'm usually wearing hats. I don't always wear them on calls, and it's a little bit warm in my house, so I'm not going to put one on now. I did have I presented at my company's internal conference last week, and the moderators are like, "Hey, Colin, you should put on your hat." And it was kind of like it was not a suggestion. It was like you're gonna put your hat right now, because they're just like so obsessed with seeing me in my hat.
You should be able to screen share now. That's so funny.
Excellent. Working through some menus here. Hold on. It's been a hot minute since I tried to share something in Keynote, and
no, I to be honest, since you're looking, is that hat considered a bowler hat?
That is a top hat.
Okay. See, I thought I was going to be confident enough to have like one specialty hat, but I guess I'll go back.
Is there a rabbit in it?
Yeah. There is not, but there are many other things that I pull out of it. Usually bad opinions. All right. Can you see my screen? You're seeing a box that says code review is an architectural necessity with my name repeated twice.
Yes.
Excellent. All right. So let's get this show on the road. Maybe. There we go. Hi, I'm Colin Dean. I engineer quality software and organize conferences to help people build quality software. You've maybe heard of Code and Supply. You have hopefully heard of Abstractions, our larger conference, and I'll talk more about that at the end. Some key things, mostly from the lawyers. My words are my own and not my employer's, past or present. I refer to basically every employer I've ever had in this presentation. There may be some swearing, and please do save your questions until the end of the presentation, although this is an online thing, so feel free to throw them in the chat and we'll get to them whenever we get to them. Here's a quick agenda for the things I'm going to cover. We'll give you a fun anecdote about my past and as it relates to review. We'll define what code review is. We'll talk about the problems that it solves, some quality attributes that it ensures, some tips and some limitations. My first experience with review was with a student newspaper in college, first as a copy editor. I took on layout, I picked up a journalism minor, and eventually rose to be editor-in-chief despite being a computer science major in a sea of English majors. For 3.5 years, I read everything that was fit to print and a whole lot more that wasn't. Even as the editor, nothing that I wrote went into the newspaper without somebody else editing it, just like every other piece of content. I was at the top, but I was still getting reviewed. No one was exempt from the dreaded red pen, or in these modern days, word processors record changes feature. That review process saved us a few times. Sometimes a student writer would just absolutely wreck a piece, and a copy editor was too chicken to reject it outright and ask them to redo it. So I or somebody else on the layout staff would have to rewrite it ad hoc. Just like versioning commit logs or GitHub PR suggestions. We would add our name to that byline, or sometimes just entirely replace it because it just wasn't going to work. When we were doing layout, sometimes we would use a lot of X's as like a easily spotted placeholder. And it wasn't sometimes until final review that before sending something to prepress that we would catch this long series of X's. One time, a headline that said, "What the fuck is this shit?" above an awful looking picture of a piece of pizza made it to prepress. My 70-something-year-old prepress operator, who'd probably been doing her job longer than I'd been alive, calls me up and says, "Colin, look at page A8. You owe me a beer." Click. So I've been doing code reviews, or really my work reviews, for the majority of my career before I even knew that they were existing in software, which is of course my primary field now. But really, what are code reviews? So let's establish a common definition for our time together. How many of you are familiar with code review and code review practices? Can I get a show of hands, or maybe some pings in the chat? Probably just about everybody is these days. It's a pretty common practice across most companies, but still not everybody does it. So I thought a bit about how to define it, and I wrote this. I wrote, code review is the process by which those who maintain software, software code base, evaluate a proposed change to that code base. Is everybody okay? I heard something in the background there. If you could,
sorry, continue.
Yeah, no worries. Code review is the process by which those who maintain a software code base evaluate a proposed change to that code base, regardless of the source of the proposed change. And like many things, Wikipedia's definition is more succinct. Wikipedia says, code review is the systematic examination of computer source code. This definition allows for some broader techniques than I myself care to participate in or suffer, but the similarity is bolded. The act is an examination, and that examination must be systematic. You may be familiar with the term peer review and asking, aren't code review and peer review the same? Well, yes, but I dislike calling them peer reviews, as some experts such as Carl Wiegers and others do, because that puts too much focus on the peer whose work is under review, as well as the peers who are annotating the code. By calling it code review, we specify in our nomenclature that we are reviewing code and not the person. Our focus is on the code we're going to have to maintain, not the personalities of the people involved in getting into production. Moreover, in more recent times, there's a lot of automated code changes that are made, and we want to be inclusive of those machines and those processes as well. Carl Wiegers himself actually commented on a text version of this presentation I published on the IBM blog many years ago, specifically pointing out the reuse of the term from the scientific community's concept of peer-reviewed journals. I understand and understood that similarity, even as I was originally doing this presentation, but I feel that the software engineering community can do better, especially after learning during the last few years about the politics, the rigor, and the financial incentives of the academic publishing community. Moreover, everything is code these days, as I just kind of alluded to. Architecture and design documents can be expressed as code. You set up your systems with the configuration management tool or infrastructure definition software, right? Infrastructure is code, they say, with things like Chef and Terraform, AWS, and a variety of other things. A typo could be an immediate tenfold cost increase, if not more. So throughout this presentation, I'll use these 5 words, and I've used some of them already: change, submission, submitter, reviewer, and annotation. These are probably more easily expressed in context. The submitter proposes changes in a submission, which is evaluated by a reviewer who annotates or accepts it. Carl Wiegers, who, if you're unfamiliar with the area, he's kind of the foremost expert on peer review in software. His book is literally called Peer Review in Software. Carl Wiegers describes this peer review formality spectrum in his book, Peer Reviews in Software, where inspection is the most formal and ad hoc reviews are the least formal. Whoop. I just went forward an extra slide and suddenly my controls are not working. 1 second, I'm sorry. All right, are we back?
Yeah, we can see it says most formal, least formal.
Yes, excellent. For some reason, my left and right aren't working on there. My concept of code review and my past and current team's practice of code review falls somewhere between team review and pair programming. We will, from time to time, allow pairs to review their own small changes at their discretion. However, our general rule is if you wrote it, you shouldn't review it. The biggest difference from Wiegers' description is that we do not have formal meetings at the end of the spectrum. My engineering teams found these formal meetings to be inefficient at best and excruciatingly painful at worst. Rather, code reviews are best conducted at reviewers' leisure. These kind of the idea of an asynchronous process. I prefer to do them in the morning because it gets my brain back into code mode before I actually have to write any code for the day. As my responsibilities increased during my career, I've also used the time to count backlogged reviews and think of ways to motivate my team to do their reviews before the days stand up. Just about everybody's heard of GitHub these days. When I first did this presentation, GitHub was still a relatively novel thing. I've used GitHub or its on-premises enterprise edition for almost all of my projects at almost all of my employers for the last decade. GitHub's pull request system, people are pretty familiar with it nowadays in about the 6 years since it's been out, is a pretty stellar example of a code review tool. It's quite robust for leaving comments, referencing code, keeping track of conversations about the various changes in a submission, and of course, making suggestions is one of the most powerful things of it. Larger teams sometimes reach for other tools though, and the names of those tools are out of scope for this talk. The review system introduced in 2016 it's pretty great, but it benefits from automation to make it more useful and to reduce the drag of internal disagreement. More on that later. So what problems does code review solve? It's pretty clear that the primary goal of code review is to find defects before they enter the maintained code base. However, there are two human problems for which code review is an effective tool to solve. Code review solves mental model synchronization. You've got 5 people on your team. Do they all have the same mental model of the architecture and the implementation? Probably not. Hopefully they're similar. Code review reduces feedback cycles so that people can keep their mental model in synchronization with the architecture, even as it changes. With that in mind, they're best equipped to mindfully implement the architecture and provide feedback on its design. What if someone has a different idea entirely, one that's so worth exploring that it could change the architecture? That's happened more than once on my team, where discussions on individual lines of code turned into new issues, new pull requests, architectural changes, and sometimes even entirely new products. Code review is an excellent way to develop and keep alive the tribal knowledge of a project. Tribal knowledge is the sum of stories of what was tried and failed and how best to handle certain problems commonly faced, and this concept of how things came to be this way. A part of this is something called architecture oral history. Architecture oral history collapses without a team to keep the culture alive, says Michael Keeling, a former coworker of mine at Vivissimo and IBM Watson. Code review, or more specifically code review systems, enable a major part of that oral history to be written down, serving as a reference point or even a starting point for documenting the change of architecture and implementation over time. The most useful review systems will make comments searchable for posterity and encourage reviewers to extract actionable items from comments into issue or work tracking systems for future consideration. Still waiting for GitHub to enable that particular feature. Code review doesn't just help build knowledge of application code anymore. Code review can enable developers to continuously review changes to the infrastructure and have an audit trail with the logic and discussion around the changes. With my setup at work, I'm a few lines of Terraform or YAML and a code review away from launching a whole new service on our Kubernetes infrastructure. Code review can enable architects then to continuously review changes to the architecture and have an audit trail with logic and discussion around those changes too. Developers are included in this conversation too, especially at organizations where there's a separation between the architects and the developers. Architecture documents should live in the same repository as the code that they describe. It's not a bad idea to have a system architecture repository which describes the interaction between the components, but be careful not to dump too much into this one area. The architecture should remain as close to the code as it makes sense to do so. This builds knowledge of how things changed over time and how things came to be this way. So in short, for this section, code review forces us to write it down and make it searchable. Let's talk about 3 specific quality attributes that I care about deeply in this area, and that these quality attributes are the ones that code review solidly ensures. If you value these attributes in your architecture, then you should be definitely doing code review. When authors move on from a project, who's going to care for that project? People aren't forever. They move on to other projects or they leave the organization, winning the lottery, so they say. And neither are their minds forever. They forget what they did and why they did it after a few months, weeks, or even days. So it's vital that architecture values maintainability. Let's talk about that first. To me, valuing maintainability in an architecture necessitates that engineers write maintainable code that can be picked up easily and quickly modified by new developers. It also has a design that is easy for non-programmers to understand. Code review drives all of these. The best way to get someone acquainted with code is to throw them into it, not from the go make this change point of view, but rather take a look at this real code with me. We want them to learn the conventions and the patterns of the codebase's use of the language and frameworks of the project. We want both the initial developers and the maintenance mode crew to understand the goals of the architecture and the risks present in the code as it exists today. With this knowledge, they can then deal with the problems on their own terms. We want them to use the same terminology too, because establishing that vocabulary is necessary to make the project learnable. This chart shows the modalities for learning in a reviewing situation. Pairing is great, but we need to spend just as much time reviewing in order to transfer knowledge to the next generation of engineers. We need to read solid code, and we need to read code that can be improved. We need to point out problems that solidify problem code and have our misunderstandings, our type 1 false positive review comments, corrected by reviewers who disagree with us. And that next generation is not only younger engineers, but it's also the sucker taking over for you when you go work on a cooler project. It's vital to ensure that the developers on a project understand the architecture and the implementation decisions alike. While they may not be involved in the construction of each decision, code review enables them to be aware of the changes and ask questions about those changes as the project evolves. In doing so, they better understand the architecture and the implementation and are better equipped to identify undesirable and desirable deviations from the established plan and best practice. This builds tribal knowledge ripe for passing to others, including to executives and to investors in the proverbial elevator. This institutional knowledge is absolutely invaluable. Serviceability focuses on the ability of a technical support team to provide that support. By exposing new configuration, hiding unnecessary or debugging configuration, and agreeing on use cases that may fall outside the primary architectural goals, code review drives consensus on what the people supporting the project will be expected to know and do. This also, of course, drives documentation. Linus's law applies here. Problems are more likely to be seen if more people are looking at the source of the problem, sometimes literally the source code. So to me, a code review ensures maintainability by encouraging engineers to write code that meets a consensus agreement on maintainability. Code that can be modified quickly and quickly picked up by new developers is easy for non-programmers to understand and for programmers to program. All of these quality attributes are intertwined too. Systems that are serviceable are understandable. Systems that are understandable are learnable. So in my first programming job out of school was at a business-to-business imprinting company, a screen printer, basically. We used Subversion as my first version control system. It was pretty neat. No code review, though. We just kind of pushed up whenever we were done with working on something. Our engineering process was do this thing and don't break the build, and whenever the build server was actually working. I didn't have to deal with production bugs because the company didn't want us to work outside of business hours. Yeah, weird, I know. Rare outages were the responsibility of the tech lead, but because he wasn't reviewing any of the code changes, outages would take a very long time to resolve because he had to learn and understand the code in order to service it. The lack of code review in this company was a very clear problem. Those outages were very rare, but they were generally caused by generally avoidable, obvious errors spotted only after hours of reading through code and changes. A few months after I left, one guy cost the company thousands of dollars in lost sales because he'd left his own email address hard-coded for a new subsystem instead of the prescribed environment variable that would deliver email to the order processors ready to handle these orders. This mistake was in place for 4 months. Unfortunately, he was fired, despite this being his first and only mistake ever in many years of employment, one that could have been easily prevented by code review. Secondly, of the three, code review ensures compliance. You have more than one person on your team knowledgeable of like Section 508 and WCAG and ARIA, as well as internationalization and localization standards, right? Code review not only aids compliance by expert review, but can teach best practice, thereby expanding the number of people who can write code with accessibility in mind. Code review drives auditability. Version control shows what changed and the reason for the change, but it doesn't describe the decisions that were dropped. As we say, Git history is written by the victorious commit. Idiomaticity is the quality of using tools chosen for the project in the best way that they were designed to be used. Ever seen Java that looked like C? Lisp littered with lets? Java-style mutable objects everywhere in your Scala? These are violations of the idioms that these tools prescribe. Idiom violations can make for less readable code and in some cases, less performant code. Writing idiomatic code enables the compiler or interpreter to produce and run faster programs. My second job out of school was a consulting role. An applications engineer was my title. The lack of control and review cost us considerable time and effort across most of our engagements. From customers, technical people messing up things and not owning up to it because we only saved the last version of everything we did, to not having an audit trail or a second set of eyes leading to a compromised system at a government lab, albeit with no evidence of any exploitation in process. That was a fun situation. My first professional code review experience was a group meeting, a formal inspection. It was painful. I was working with a primary contractor as a subcontractor. I was the expert in the room in our software, and I was just the guy in the back saying, no, you're doing it wrong. I even developed the tool that exported the product's configuration file so that we could even do the reviews from my particular part of the software. Imagine this, but almost everyone looking at their mobile or their laptop. That's me in the back there, just kind of leaning back saying, the fuck's this shit? Everyone wanted to get ahead. Incentives weren't aligned. Employees got overtime while making lucrative salaries. Contractors and subcontractors who exhausted their budgets would end up doing free work just so that they didn't look bad. It was not a good situation. The waste was very real. This group inspection involving 2 employees at about $100 each, $100 an hour each, 1 subcontractor, myself, at $200 per hour, and 7 subcontractors at about $150 per hour for 4 hours per week cost taxpayers nearly $6,000 per week, or almost $300,000 per contract year. And those are 2010 dollars, by the way. The project did eventually launch, but by many metrics was not successful. The primary contractor lost the renewal, and I was the only subcontractor to remain on the project under the new primary, which eventually acquired our company just a few months later. Most of the waste could have been eliminated through a better code review process. The formality of inspections may have been a symptom rather than the problem, though as I was not party to the discussion that mandated them. That so many people could say no for a product unrelated to safety drastically increased frustrations, costs, and ultimately customer dissatisfaction. Thirdly, of the 3, code review ensures security. We want to spot vulnerabilities before they ship and teach defensive posture. Linus's law applies here too. But the best way to keep out the bugs and vulnerabilities in code, simply minimize unnecessary features. Yagni, you ain't gonna need it. I get this called on me a lot, and having that happen makes it happen less often. In this situation, reviewers are like your lawyer, the one that keeps you from doing something stupid, hopefully. So next, some tips, and I'm going to kind of fly through these because I think I'm getting pretty close to time. When should you integrate code review? Now, because the structure of the structure of an architecture eventually mirrors that of the developing organization and vice versa. This is Conway's law. It's vital that an architecture include code review as not only a technical requirement at the same level as the choice of a language stack or interprocess communication methodology, but also as a project requirement that describes how the members of the project's development team are expected to interact with each other and provide feedback in order to strengthen the project and the architecture behind it. According to the best kept secrets of code review, a case study at Cisco Systems found that there was negligible difference in the number of defects found when reviewing in a formal setting versus informally. For example, using the individual review methods that I described earlier, while informal reviews were faster and more cost efficient. The ideal review size should not exceed 400 lines of code. As I approach a decade of using that heuristic, it's been continually validated, literally day in, day out. So code review should occupy units of work. That is, if your team is using story points or some other system to estimate effort necessary to complete a task, estimate the time necessary to conduct reviews. My team uses a Fibonacci story point system, so most of our reviews are 1 or 2 points. If it's a big change or potentially controversial change with a lot of input to create and process, it might be a 3 or a 5. Except that not everything is perfect. A good code review system will enable reviewers or submitters to create new work items quickly and easily. Identify areas that see a lot of changes and understand why that is. There's a whole field of study related to that, so don't get too deep within it within the scope of reviews. It's also important not to be petty. Keeping it professional and learning when to speak instead of continuing to bicker electronically is vital. Automate aggressively. If you can automate some aspect of the review, even if it's a pre-commit hook, do it. Save review time for the hard stuff only a human can suss out. But most of all, make progress. Don't let reviews slow down development unnecessarily. Dogpile reviews when they get backed up. These are some of the things that we look for whenever we're doing code reviews. Some projects have certain concerns, but these are largely universal. I stress the value and importance of automation here. One of the first things that I do in every code base I touch now is to automate style checking or linting. When I've done this to existing code bases with existing teams, one of the most frequent corrections in code reviews went away. white space and formatting. Don't let people disable it in CI either. But most importantly, does it work? And is it tested? So just a few more slides here. Let's talk about some limitations of code review. Code review cannot really expose how code changes in the runtime environment. A reviewer is certainly encouraged to download and execute the code as a simple verification if they feel that the provided tests are insufficient, but to do this constantly can greatly extend the review period and detract from that reviewer's development time. Reviewers must learn when to communicate person to person instead of continuing a typewritten conversation. Drawn out electronic conversation is time consuming and should only occur when code examples or hyperlinks are necessary to understand comments. Lastly, code review cannot magically get your boss off of you or stop QA from knocking at your door, and it certainly won't stop layoffs. In fact, code review can be a barrier to one's own ownership of their contributions. A reviewer with an agenda could effectively block a submitter through combative or unnecessary annotations, or steal credit for their submission entirely through resubmission. One woman developer, Julianne Horvath, cited this as a part of her reason for leaving her employer, GitHub, later filing lawsuits alleging sexism. I believe she won. She held that a coworker that she had snubbed romantically blocked her work and would waste time altering it needlessly. Through the years, I've heard far too many stories like this. Reviews are a place for learning, not for aggression. A counter to this specific problem, ensure that no one reviewer is a bottleneck or a single point of failure, and that multiple reviewers can and do review submitters' code. It's not a bad idea to use some kind of automatic assignment of reviews from a pool. Simple functionality is built into GitHub these days, but reach pretty quickly for more complex tools the moment that you feel that you need them. So that's about it. Just a couple more slides. Microsoft Research published a paper in 2013, Expectations, Outcomes, and Challenges of Modern Code Review, a part of which asked developers for their motivations for performing code review, the definition of which matches very closely with what I established at the beginning of this talk. From this, we can observe more empirically that some of the outcomes of code review. All of these are desirable. Thus, code review should be desirable and a part of your process. So we'll close out here now. We've talked about the definition of code review. My new definition is a systematic examination of proposed changes to a code base. We've talked about the problems that code review solves, modeling, knowledge sharing. We've talked about the primary quality attributes that code review ensures of maintainability, compliance, and security. And we've reviewed some of my tips, suggestions, and caveats about how best to do code review. So please go forth and review code. But before you do check out Code and Supply. I'm not going to give you the full spiel, but codeandsupply.co, and you can engage with us here in Pittsburgh, where I live. I'm Colin Dean. You can catch me, see my talks, including these slides, up on github.com/ColinDean/talks or on my speaker deck profile. Thanks for listening.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much, Colin. And yeah, does anybody, now is totally a great time. You can unmute yourself and ask, or you can throw your stuff in the chat. David said that he liked the idea of separating pointing. I do like those alternatives that you offered to story pointing. I think that's really cool. Yeah, does anybody have anything that they want to, even if it's not a question, do you just want to add something?
Sure. Anybody?
I can throw something out there. You hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, cool. I have the double mute sometimes on Zoom. So no, thanks for the talk. I was wondering if you use any things like conventional comments. It's not a hard, fast rule to do things, but it's I've been using it for a while, and we use something different at Netlify. It's a framework they created over there, but it's similar. And I'm just wondering if you've used something like that or what your thoughts are on that.
Interestingly enough, none of my teams have ever used it. However, I've contributed to several open source projects that do use it and do enforce it. And I know that within my employer, there are teams that do it. However, we don't mandate it as a group. I like it. I think sometimes it can be a little bit rigid, but sometimes that discipline is a good thing depending on the size of our project.
Nice. Heck yes. Well, thank you so much, Colin. I really appreciate it. And of course, if anybody thinks of questions, throw them in the chat. We can always, touch base again at the end. But other than that, I am going to go back to my slide presentation, and I'm going to let Noah take it over and introduce Nick.
Yes, awesome. Thank you. Colin, that was really great. I think you had some fantastic points. I think that I'm still working on personally in my review process, but I like how you finished up. Thank you for that. So everybody, our next speaker is Nick Taylor. Is going to be speaking about Fresh, a new full stack web framework for Deno. Nick Taylor is a staff software engineer focusing on front-end technologies and tooling with a growing interest in serverless and edge computing. He currently works on the ecosystem team at Netlify, focusing on web frameworks. Nick, as long as you have permissions, you can take it away.
Cool. Just gonna go ahead and share my screen here. Make sure we get the right screen share. Not that I have anything weird on my screen, but okay, so you should all be able to see my slide deck there. That all good?
Yep.
Cool. Thanks for the intro there, Noah. So like Noah said, we're going to talk about Fresh today. It's a new full stack web framework for Deno. And before we get to that, we'll just do some not formal stuff, but just a bit about me. Noah mentioned most of it. I blog and I have other things going on at imdeveloper.com. One thing that I really enjoy doing is streaming on Twitch. It varies, but usually there's live coding, hanging out with folks in the tech space. Sometimes it's more interview style. It really varies, but it's something I really enjoy doing. And if that's kind of your jam, I'm on Twitch there. You can go to imdeveloper.live. And in terms of YouTube, it's mainly right now, it's just the recordings from Twitch, but at some point, I'm probably going to try and do some more YouTube-oriented content, but I do work full-time, so I'm not a full-time content creator, so, it does take a bit of time. Aside from that, not a big fan of spiders. Just a little side note there. So in case anybody has a tarantula in the chat, please refrain from putting it on your webcam. Thank you. Cool. So so we're just going to go over what we'll cover today. So we're going to talk about what is Fresh. We're also going to talk about what Deno is, and then we're going to talk about web standards briefly. We're going to go through some of the features in Fresh. We're going to talk about the styling story. This is a web-based framework. Going to do a demo, and then definitely questions if you have any. When I'm doing the demo, if you do have questions at that point, it's okay to ask them then if you'd like to, because I'll be showing some code and also showing an application running. And I'm pretty used to that because when you stream on Twitch, people are asking stuff in the chat. So, but for the first part, if you could just hold on to the questions until we get to the demo or the questions at the end. Okay, cool. So let's talk about what Fresh is. Okay, hold on. Before we talk about Fresh, we need to talk about what Deno is. So what is Deno? So Deno is a runtime for JavaScript, TypeScript, and WebAssembly, a term you might have heard before, WASM, and it uses V8. If you're not familiar with what V8 is a JavaScript engine. This is what powers Chrome, the web browser, as well as the Chromium project, which is the open source project that Chrome kind of bootstraps on top of. It's also the JavaScript engine that Node.js uses. And a fun fact here is the creator of Deno is actually the creator of Node.js, and Deno was created out of frustration and design decisions that they had done in Node. There's a talk, it's linked in the resources at the end, but you can Google it too. It's called 10 Things I Regret About Node.js by Ryan Dahl, the creator of Node.js and now Deno. Yeah, aside from that, for web, it runs on the edge. So edge, that means in terms of like edge computing, and I'm not going to go into that too deeply, but basically it just means serving your application as close to a user as possible. I had a chance to hang out with Sunil Pai, who used to work at Cloudflare, and when we talked, he was saying like maybe one day there'll even be like, you know, edge compute as close as like your washing machine. So I think he's being slightly sarcastic, but who knows, maybe there's some truth to it. So
actually, Nick, I had a question regarding that. When you say it runs on the edge, not natively, you have to, whether you're using Netlify or Cloudflare, you have to deploy that to the edge, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah. So in regards to Netlify has a Netlify Edge offering, and that is using Deno. Deno has their own offering. There's also Cloudflare workers, like you said. All those things, yes, you do need to deploy them. And we can talk a bit about that at the end if you'd like to. But yeah, essentially, yeah, you got to deploy it somewhere.
All right. Thank you.
Cool. Aside from that, you can also create command line interfaces, CLIs with Deno. And in terms of some of the stuff that Colin was talking about, there's a built-in linter, built-in code formatter. So all those things in terms of code review, you know, the useless reviews of white space changes or formatting, those things are built in, as well as a built-in test runner. If you've worked in Node.js, you'll notice that there are a lot of great tools, but like most projects, you're going to bootstrap it with Prettier. You might use Husky for the pre-commit hooks that Colin was talking about. You know, there's ESLint, there's TypeScript ESLint, and then if you want to do testing, you know, you'll probably put Jest, or maybe you'll use something newer like Ava or vtest. So one of the goals behind Deno is kind of like a batteries all included, you know, like just here's the kitchen sink, just start building stuff. And it does have type.
Sorry, Nick.
Yeah.
Is there something similar in Node.js that you have Helmet, which locks your APIs down? Is there something within Deno itself that is that built in, or is that a third-party library where we lock down your APIs?
I think you would probably still have to lock down your APIs to some degree, you know, like security best practices. But one of the things that Deno does that Node.js doesn't is you have to enable what you want to do. You want network access, you actually have to enable it. If you want to access the file system, you have to enable it. So there's some more guardrails in place. So, but in terms of like, yeah, for APIs and stuff, I would still look to stuff to secure your APIs. And I'm not a security expert, but, you know, go OWASP and, you know, definitely speak to your coworkers and stuff.
All right, thank you.
I'm not sure. Yeah, no worries. Cool. Yeah, so that's kind of Deno in a nutshell. I'm not going to go too much deeper into it. The reason why I wanted to just mention all that is because of a lot of these things, you get a lot of stuff in fresh. There's Luca Casanata. I did a stream with him. He's the tech lead at Deno. He's also the creator of Fresh, the framework we're talking about today. So if you want kind of like a little snack size, you know, TLDR of what Deno is, I highly recommend checking out this. It's about like a 5-minute video. It's linked in the resources at the end. So yeah. Okay, cool. I have it embedded in my slide deck, and when you click spacebar again, it starts the video, and I was trying to avoid that, but you got a little bit there. Anyways, so yeah, so that brings us to Fresh. So Fresh is a new full stack web framework that runs on Deno. It's a server-side rendered framework. So if you've heard the term SSR, a lot of frameworks are going that way. You've even probably heard it like Next.js, for example. They're using React server components now. They're promoting a more server-side rendered story. Astro, Svelte, all of these have server-side rendered capabilities built in now. Another thing about Fresh is you get just-in-time rendering on the edge, because that's where we deploy Fresh apps to. The other thing is, and I'll speak to a bit about what that is in a second. You also get TypeScript support out of the box. And those two things are possible because of Deno. So Deno is running V8, but it's actually has TypeScript built into their into Deno. And what happens is when you request a page, it actually compiles the TypeScript on the fly when you request a page. And this is something that I initially didn't understand about Deno. I'm like, I could understand from the server side of things, like if you were not running a web app, like how you might just be running TypeScript, but it didn't click with me how you're getting TypeScript into like client side. There has to be some kind of, because typically when you build with TypeScript, you have a whole bundling step and that transpiles the TypeScript to JavaScript. So this is something that happens as you make requests for things that are TypeScript. And it also supports JSX out of the box because TypeScript supports transforming JSX. And one of the other nice things about it is there's nothing to configure. I mean, I'm sure you could configure things if you need to, but to get started, there's literally nothing to configure. By default, it ships no JavaScript to the browser. It's all server-side rendered. If you actually want to have any kind of client-side interactivity, it's using an architecture called islands. This is something that was coined by Jason Miller and I believe I'm not sure if I'm saying her name correctly, but Katie Soiler Miller, who is at Etsy or used to work at Etsy. And the islands architecture in a nutshell, think of like an ocean as your web page, and then like think of like a button that has interactivity as this little island, and it's that little island that has literally only the JavaScript associated with that interactivity. And that's why you get these kind of like little pockets of interactivity and you get as minimal JavaScript as you need. But by default, you can just stick with server-side rendering. It uses JSX and it's using Preact, which if you're not familiar with, it's a lighter version of React, and it's starting to diverge away a bit from what React's architecture is. But for the most part, you can easily swap in Preact. I used to use Preact when I worked at Dev2. That's what we use in the front end there. So it's really nice and it's lightweight. And something interesting about Preact now is if you're not familiar, there's another project from a coworker of mine called SolidJS. And in there's a lot of things going on with reactivity, and they use something called signals. I won't go into this too much, but basically Preact is implemented signals, so you can have reactivity as well with Preact. So you get that for free and Fresh because it's using Preact.
Yeah, but Nick, SolidJS does not use the VDOM where Preact does, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. There's definitely different different approaches for sure.
Yeah, because that's SolidJS is Ryan Carniato. I forgot his maybe.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's my coworker Ryan Carniato. That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, and you are right. Yeah, there is no VDOM in SolidJS, but in Preact there is. But if you go ahead with using something like signals, then you don't actually need to re-render your entire component, so you don't have to worry about as much DOM diffing with the VDOM. It's a little out of scope of the talk tonight, but if you're curious about what the VDOM is, no, it's okay. It's just for the folks.
No, I had on Twitter earlier this week, I had some back and forth with Jason regarding the signals and what the I was looking at the source code of it. So sorry, I don't mean to digress. So I apologize. No,
it's all good. I was going to say is if folks are interested, just Google virtual DOM. It's something that React's been doing for a while, and Preact does it as well. But a lot of other frameworks like Svelte, for example, do not use it at all. They take a reverse approach. They compile away things and they only leave what's interactive. But yeah, there's just so much going on in JavaScript land, honestly, and so many web frameworks. So, just lots to learn and lots going on. Okay, so let's continue here. So we're going to talk about web standards for a sec. Now, Deno is based off of web standards. So that means you have fetch, you have the response and request objects. These are all things that if you go to MDN, you'll see these things. If you've looked into Remix at all, which is another web framework from the people that created React Router, and it's been recently acquired by Shopify, they're kind of going this way too in terms of web standards. And a lot of frameworks are doing this, or runtimes. And so they actually created this standards group called the Winter CG. I'm trying to remember what it stands for, but if you just go to the website, it's linked after. But on there, you have folks like Cloudflare for Cloudflare workers, Deno, and then maybe at some point Bun, which is another runtime. I'm not going to go into Bun, but it's another JavaScript runtime that's kind of blown up on the scene this year. And if there's other future runtimes, they could potentially join this web standards group as well, the Winter CG. And just funny side note, but for some reason, ByteDance, the company that owns TikTok, is on this on this thing. So just a little funny side note. Anyways, yeah. So other web standards, you have something called import maps. So if you're used to package.json, where you're installing your node modules, and you just say like npm install this particular package, there's no node modules in Deno, and it uses this web standard called import maps, and it's basically URL based imports, and they're requested when they're first imported. If you're doing local development, they will get cached, but it's just staying within web standards. Again, I'm not going to go too much into it, but just kind of trying to give these things to give you kind of like, because Fresh is a framework, but it's really built on a lot of these things. So just to give a bit of context. Yeah, so let's talk about features. Just doing a quick time check here. Okay. So there's a lot of things in Fresh that you're probably familiar with. You can serve static files. There's routes, so you can use file-based routing, which is stuff you've probably seen like in Next.js or other frameworks. There's a data fetching story similar to remixes, where you have this notion of actions. So you can do GET requests or posts or any kind of RESTful endpoints for forms. And aside from that, there's middleware, which we're not going to go into, but middleware is something pretty standard in a lot of web frameworks. There's also custom error pages you can have. And there's also these islands I was talking about before, which are related to the islands architecture. And when we get to the demo, it won't be a super long demo because I just want to be mindful of time, but you can kind of see this in action. Okay, one thing I want to talk about is styling. And the reason why I want to talk about it is because one of the things that Fresh touts as like a feature is there's no bundle step. Like I mentioned, when you request a page, it's actually going to compile the TypeScript on the fly or the JSX and then serve it. And in terms of styling, for folks who do work in web, there's many ways you can do this. You could use Tailwind with something like Post CSS, maybe using Sass. But typically, a lot of web-based projects are using some kind of tool to generate the final CSS. So right now, the styling story for Fresh, because Fresh just hit 1.0 earlier this year. They have something called Twind or Twind, I think it's called. And it's a server-side rendered implementation of Tailwind. So it's Tailwind kind of server-side rendered on the fly. I haven't really used it, but that is an option. There's other things too, like for folks, depending on where you are in your career, you may have never seen this before, but there's a link tag that you can use in the head of a web page, and you can use the rel attribute to say style sheet, and then you can reference an actual style sheet. A lot of frameworks do this under the hood for you, so you never see this, but I'm just mentioning that because plain CSS is pretty good these days, to be honest. It doesn't mean, that you're not going to use your other tools, but just thought I'd mention that. And when I did speak to Luca on my stream there, he was saying that probably there'll be more work in regards to styling options in the future. And because it's all open source, I have a feeling that, you know, people in the ecosystem will probably come up with some solutions too. Yeah.
Nick, if you don't mind, can you
Yeah,
use a JS CSS library like Emotion or style components with this?
I haven't tried it, but you probably could. But the thing with most of those styling solutions is if you're using a good one, they will still compile down to like a CSS file at the end of the day with kind of like scope styles or something.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
because it's using Preact, I imagine you could probably hook it up.
Okay.
But I haven't tried it. But I feel like it would be possible.
Okay.
But to use that though, you would probably need to add some kind of build step in regards to that. And this is again, this is why I just brought up the whole styling thing, because this is, I think, something they're still sorting out, you know.
Yeah,
But it's still
exactly.
early days.
Okay, thank
Yeah,
you.
cool. All right, so I'm just gonna move us over to demo time. I know we're at almost 20 minutes, so let's make this quick for the demo. But if you want, I have a deployed version of it if you just want to tinker around with it. And I'm just gonna switch us over. Can you folks, because I can't see my shared screen, do you see a
Yeah.
lemon on the screen now with a
Yeah,
counter?
seeing it. Definitely.
Okay,
And
cool.
Nick, please feel free to, you know, show everything that you need. Don't really worry about time. People are here, they're free to leave as they need to.
Okay. All right. You're here till midnight now. Okay, yeah. So there's a few things here. I'm gonna be looking to my left because it's on my other screen, but I put this demo together and just to show a few things here. Doesn't look like anything fancy, but we have here, there's a bit of client-side interactivity here. So if I click on the plus, the counter is going up and down. That chunk of code there is using an island, and I'll show you how you can use that in a second. There's other things you can do. There's API routes that you can use, which is stuff you've probably seen in something like Next.js. So here I'm just getting a random joke. So if I just keep clicking, coming back, the joke keeps changing. We have I made a small movie demo here. So basically you can add a movie like, I don't know, Encanto. I have kids. And I can submit it, boom. And what this here is, this is using the data fetching and where you can actually get stuff. So that's loading the list of movies, but also you can post and add a new movie. I'm gonna just show in the code here. So let me just move over here. Just gonna shrink that a little bit. Can everybody see the font size for the code okay?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so if you've done any React in TypeScript, this is a TSX file. So a lot of things should be familiar to you. So we have ESM imports. We're pulling in some files here. I have a TypeScript interface here. I have some movies here. I actually don't need that await, but so this is my mock in-memory database. This is literally just an array that runs when you stop the server. It's just gonna.
Yeah, Nick, I was going to ask you about that. I was going to ask about the await from the array. So
yeah. No worries. It's because I was using it before, because down below, I forgot to take that out. Also, I'm gonna post the code on GitHub. I'll make it public once I've just got it cleaned up and stuff a bit.
Yeah.
So there's a few things here. So let's just gonna close this section for a second. But here's the kind of like what you're probably used to. You're seeing a page component. You're exporting it with a default export. It's JSX, so the Preact components, sorry, they need to be uppercased, Pascal cased. And we got some props coming in. There's some types that Fresh gives you. And in here, there's nothing super complicated, I don't think, but we've got some layout, we got a header and stuff, but the brunt of it is we have this form here, and this is how we're able to add another movie there. And so this is where we talk about web standards, because people, like, I've been doing web dev since like since early 2000s, professionally, And, form submission is something that's been around forever, but like frameworks have kind of abstracted that away. Like, and people also got used to maybe a single page application approach where you just click a button, you hit some endpoint, then you get back a chunk of data and then you do something with it. It might not have even been in a form, but forms are something that just drive the entire web. Anytime you want to get information or send information, it's typically over a form. And so there's a few things here to talk about. So you have your form tag. There's a method here. The method is post. That means you want to post what you're sending here. And that's basically when you want to create something, like if you're thinking of RESTful APIs. And yeah, we just have a few things here. There's name properties here, attributes, sorry. These are what allow you to access the values within the form when you're on the server side. So we have a name and a stars field, and those will be available to us on the server side. So if I come over here to the handlers, and I find the syntax of this a little weird, but this is just how they do it. So you have to export this handler object, and in there you have two functions. You can probably have others, but for now, these are just examples of a get and a post. The things I find a little bizarre is it's just get uppercase. I imagine they wanted to use the word get, but get is actually a reserved word because of properties in JavaScript. But maybe it could have been renamed something else, but that's what they went with. So if we want to get information, so this is when the page loads, we can do something here. And then you have this context object called the handler context, and it has a render method on it. And this is where you can basically pass props to the actual page that's being rendered server side. So in this case here, I'm using my kind of like faux in-memory movies database. So I'm just basically passing the movies here. And then we can see here in the form, I'm just doing something standard in React or Preact where we're just mapping over an array. So I'm just outputting a list here, and then I have the name, which is from the movie. And this is just me just being a little fancy with an array to basically create an array of n number of stars. So that's the data loading. So when you request a page. Now, when you want to actually post the changes.
Nick, if you don't mind, the handler context object there, that type there, where is it defined at? Is that part of Preact? Is that something you define yourself?
No.
Is that interface?
This is something that Fresh is looking for. So when you export it, Fresh will be able to detect, okay, this particular page has a handler object, and let me see what it has in it. Okay, it has a get. So they are clearly trying to load some data. When the page loads, oh, they have a post. So it looks like they're adding some data when they.
So are you importing handler context as part of the component itself?
No, the handler context you see here, that's just the type. This is a generic type here. So that is imported. If you look up top here, it's being imported from Fresh.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Big props as well.
Yeah, no worries.
That's
Yeah. So all of these here are types here.
Okay.
But the convention for Fresh is, okay, you're exporting a handler object. Okay, that signals to Fresh that it knows it needs to handle some kind of actions for gets or posts. Again, I'm going to refer to the web standard stuff. So you can see here when you post stuff, the request object, and this isn't stuff specific to Fresh. It's in Deno, but it's because it's using web standards. So if you go to MDN and just look for a request, you're going to see all the properties on this here. And one of the properties is
JavaScript thing, but the handler context is not part of JavaScript. That's why I was curious about that. So thanks.
Yeah. No worries. So here we can access all the form data. And the way we're able to access this form data is, you can see here, I'm looking for name, and I'm also getting the stars. And that's because if we come back down here, it's because I gave a name attribute with the name or the name with the stars here. If you use IDs, which is something you don't typically do in React because you're usually you have access to things through refs and stuff, but using IDs in a form won't actually allow you to access that particular form element on the server side. And then again here, there's just some things here. This form data, it's an object that has a getter, so you can get the particular properties there. And then all I'm doing, again, because this isn't a demo about a database or persisting data, I'm just literally adding this movie to the array. And then after that, I say, go ahead and render the movies. And then it just updates the list down here. Now, if we come back to something like the homepage here with the counter. So this is using an island, like I mentioned. And the way to use this is if I just open up my sidebar here, you're going to see there's a components folder, but there's also this islands folder. This may change in the future, but if you have this, if you have a component in the islands folder, it means that it's going to render, if it has any kind of client-side interactivity, it will enable it. And what you can see here, so if I just close the sidebar here again, so we just got some on clicks here. We're just incrementing and decrementing the count, but that is client-side interactivity. And what I'd like to show is, say I copy this, and let's paste it over here. So we've got a counter in just the regular components folder now. I'm going to come to the index. And instead of this, I'm going to say from components. I'm going to save this. Now, hopefully, now if I refresh this, all of a sudden, you still get the component rendered, but there's no client-side interactivity now. So, and this is interesting because there's kind of some neat things you can do. So in this case here, like I said, we're just rendering it and there's no client-side interactivity, but you could do some interesting stuff. Like say, for example, you had a huge piece of text, like, I don't know, think of Hacker News when you open threads and stuff. And say that's all interactive, you know, like clicking it opens the thread and opens another thread. On the client side, you like say there's like huge chunks of messages in each of those. You don't want to necessarily client side re-render all that data there. So you can actually have a server side rendered component within an interactive component, like an island component, like taking it as its children. So you still get that interactivity, but the actual children of it end up being server side rendered and they're never re-rendered on the client side. So that there's kind of like interesting stuff like that. But the main draw about shipping less JS, like you'll just keep hearing about this more and more, is like people are I've been talking about single page applications and like just JavaScript bloat and so on. So like there's just been this shift to just serve less or no JavaScript at all. And obviously sites will typically have interactivity, so it's not like you're realistically going to have zero JavaScript, but it depends on what you're building too, you know, like my blog, I'm using another static site generator called Levendy. I have the only interactivity I have on that. Well, I have some other stuff now because I have like a podcast widget and stuff, but for the most part, it's all just static content. So I don't need a framework. It just generates the markup and then that's it. So it really also depends on what you're trying to build too, you know, but it's just nice having that option. The other thing that's interesting about this is so I mentioned that Deno is using V8. So like, I don't know if people have ever debugged Node.js, like actually run the debugger and stop the code and step through it. But because V8 is what's under the hood for Deno, you get all the same developer tools that you would have for Node.js. So I'm going to just show you real quickly. And so let me just open up here. And there's a file in here called deno.json. Think of it kind of like the package JSON, but it's really just got scripts to start and stuff. So I'm going to say Deno task. What is it? Debug. Okay, so I've started the site now, and then you're going to see here if you've ever debugged with Node, it just gives you this link. Now, if you've used VS Code, there's a built-in debugger in VS Code for Node.js, and you can use that. But the other thing is if you've if you've never seen this, you actually have server-side debugging tools in the browser. If you look closely here, I've got the developer tools open, and all of a sudden you've got this Node.js green cube here. This is actually how you do server-side debugging in a web browser. So like you could literally build web apps with literally just a browser and like Notepad. So I'm going to click on this, and it's going to start a debugger. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to let this run. And then all of a sudden, like, let's go here. I'm going to put a breakpoint here, and I'm going to come back to the demo wherever it went. Oh yeah, it's in the same. Sorry. Let me shrink this down. Okay. So let's go to the demo here, and I'm going to come back, and I'm going to click on random joke. And is it open? Okay, yeah, it is. Okay, so now just to like let it sink in case you've never done this. So I clicked on the jokes page, and now I'm in server-side code right now in the browser, and I've hit a breakpoint because I set it. That's what this blue thing is here. And now all of a sudden I'm on the server side, and I can see kind of everything that's going on. I can see everything about a request here, the context, okay, I have these random jokes, so I can see the array here. And basically I can step through. I have this map to my F keys, but I can step through and I can say, okay, what's the index it got? Okay. And this is like really not related to Fresh, but it's just kind of like a quick glimpse into debugging tools you have available to you. So you can see the scope, you can see the call stack, you can see where things came from, for example. Again, I'm not going to go into this too much, but I just wanted to show this because it's another neat thing that you get for free with Deno because it's based off of V8. And so I'm just going to let this run now. Where's my F8? Okay. And I'm just going to close this. And you can see there it generated the next joke now. Aside from that, I'll just show a couple other things in the demo, and then we're pretty much done. And if folks still have questions right now, feel free to ask them. So there's also like I was saying, similar to Next.js, there's an API folder, and in there you can have endpoints. So this is the joke route. So if you go to /API/joke, you'll get a random joke. There's the file-based routing. So for example, in this one, it's not doing anything really fancy, but if you hit any page that isn't any of the existing named routes, it's just going to load this page and say, hello, whoever. So if I come back to here, and then let's just say, let's go to Heather. And then it's just going to say, hello, Heather. This is obviously a very trivial example, but again, it's just to demonstrate that you have a lot of stuff that you've become familiar with in existing web frameworks. One of the things that they try to do with Fresh is they try to take a lot of good things they saw in existing frameworks that developers enjoyed using, and they brought them into the framework. Aside from that, there's the static folder like I was talking about. In this particular demo, I'm just literally using a plain CSS file that I wrote up. Again, though, there is the whole discussion about like the styling in Fresh. I think it's still early days, but there's the T-Wind option. You could still do some kind of build step if you wanted to use some existing tooling, but again, early days. I'll just show this briefly. This is the Deno JSON file I was talking about. This isn't Fresh specific. This is for Deno. So if you've seen package JSON, it's not the same thing, but there's some familiarity. Think of the tasks as like the script section of a package.json. And the import map is, think of that as like your node packages, and that basically just maps to the import map over here, or references it, sorry. And I'll talk about this briefly because it might look a little foreign potentially, but if you've ever used something like Webpack, Webpack has the notion of aliases. So you can like have some super long import, but you could just say like, I'm going to call it potato, and I can say import something from potato and it'll work. This is not exactly the same thing, but it's kind of what I thought it was when I first saw it. But basically what this is saying is you can import from Preact, and it's going to it's basically a redirect URL to this actual URL where the particular code lives. And a nice thing about that is if you upgrade Preact to a newer version, you can just update it here, and then that's it. And again, like I said, there's no node modules. When you're doing local development, it will pull these things in and cache them. So like the first time I installed this, it was pretty quick, but it did pull them down and stuck it in some global cache somewhere on my computer. But that's really more for like kind of development. Yeah, aside from that, just see if there's anything else here. It's using, Deno has an HTTP server, and that's what Fresh is using. And it just starts off, this starts the server, and the manifest is basically this file here, fresh.gen.ts. And this is just all the routes that are there. And this is the manifest, and that's what kind of starts things. And the islands folder makes sense to me, but I still feel like it's a little clunky. I feel like that could be improved in terms of how you decide what's an island or not. But honestly, it's an implementation detail. But for now, it makes it pretty clear, like this is something that has interactivity. Any other component, it doesn't. And that's super nice, because if you think about something like React, you have this whole rehydration story. So even if you're not necessarily, wanting to do any kind of client-side interactivity, you server-side render it, but then it still renders on the client side. So this, you don't even have that with this, unless you explicitly enable the islands there. Aside from that, if we come back to the slides, I think we're pretty much done. This is in the resources, but this is the full stream that I did with Luca. So there might be some stuff I might not have talked about today. I encourage you to check that out. And then aside from that, we've got resources. So just a bunch of things related to everything we talked about, including some web standard stuff, the islands architecture. If you're new to JSX, there's a really good blog post called WTF is JSX from Jason Miller, who created Preact. And just a few other things like the talk I was telling you about, 10 things I regret about Node.js, Preact, a few other things. And aside from that, the slide deck's available here. And yeah, any other questions?
No questions per se, but I recently did some work on Fresh, and I'm just wondering, have you been harassed by anybody at Netlify for deploying this on Deno deploy?
Yeah, so because I
Just
work
kidding.
on the frameworks team, yeah, no, it's all good. Because I work on the frameworks team, like this is one of the things like that I work on. And so like, for example, making Next.js work on Netlify, that's stuff I do. When I did the stream with Luca about Fresh, as soon as I finished that stream, the first thing I tried to do is deploy it to Netlify.
Same.
It's not possible at the moment, but it's something that's on my personal radar, and a couple of my coworkers on my direct team. It's something we want to get in there. So can't give a timeline or anything, but it's definitely a topic of interest for us internally. So I will say unofficially, we are officially interested in it. Yeah. Unofficially.
That's fantastic. Yeah, for anyone who is interested in this and looking at Nick's example or kind of tries to do it on their own, it is worth noting that the T-Wind implementation of Tailwind is using version 2 of Tailwind, not their latest version. So some of the syntax for that is a little bit different. Not a lot, but you might need to go look at the older Tailwind documentation to get exactly what you need style-wise. Okay, cool. Yeah, no, thanks for that. Yeah, no, this is a lot of fun. Thanks, Heather and Noah and everybody. Yeah, if there's no other questions right now, that's totally cool. I mean, we went through quite a few during the talk too. But feel free to reach out to me. I'm at Nikki T online pretty much everywhere on the internet. Or if you can't find me, you can go straight to my site and you should be able to find all my socials there. And if you're into Twitch, come say hi someday.
We love
Great
it.
talk.
Yeah, thank you. That was awesome. Cool. Well, thank you guys. And again, if you have questions, you can interrupt me, and I just want to do a couple quick housekeeping things. I think tonight's presentations were really good examples of like conversations that we might want to continue. So we've actually started a Bitovi community channel, and Bitovi is just, Noah and I both work for Bitovi. It's the company that sponsors these meetups. But you don't have to, you know, work for us or be a client of ours to join the Discord community. We're just trying to, you know, bring up a place for intelligent people to talk about developer things and even non-developer things, if the occasion arises. So couple quick housekeeping things, and then, you know, obviously if you got to get out of here, no worries, but a couple quick housekeeping things. We do have upcoming meetups in the new year. Tuesday, January 24th is definitely going to be virtual. So even if you're joining us from out of state or out of the country, please, you can still join us there. And you know, it's all available on meetup.com. And I'll make sure to post links and all that. February, we're toying with the notion of potentially going back in person. So just kind of, you know, keep on your radar, but again, we'll make sure we update the website for those things. If you or anybody else you know have a talk that you are interested in, you know, you want this to be your opportunity to workshop that talk, or it's something you're really proud of, a project you're working on, please, we're always happy to share those things. If you feel like something, you know, is right on the cusp of fitting our audience, or you just want to talk through it, I'm always happy to like jump on a call and we can chat about it. Same with Noah. So, you know, don't ever be afraid if it's your first foray into public speaking. Yeah. And then I think this is it, just making sure that Discord link is in the chat. No pressure to join it. It's just an option if you want it to be there. And again, you can talk about developer related stuff, or if you just want to like come say hi, it's just like a nice community. So thank you guys for joining us. And yeah, Noah, if you've got anything you want to say, jump on in, but we'll kind of wrap things up.
Yeah, only thing we'll say in terms of, so January is definitely virtual. February, with the chance of it being back in person, or any future meetups, those will still 100% be streamed to Zoom. And we're trying to be a little bit more active now on Twitch, that we got the Toby name. So we'll be it still be, you know, please tune in even if you're not in the city with us. But Nick and Colin, thank you guys so much. Really appreciate you guys taking the time to speak to us today. Seriously.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, no worries. Lots of fun.
Yeah, had a good time.
Excellent. Well, thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you at the next one. Everybody have a good, happy, healthy holiday season, and yeah, we'll chat with you soon. Thanks, guys.
All right. Take care, everybody.